Hey, Inner Circle members, Charles Lewis here, and we are about 2 minutes away from officially starting, but we just wanted to get on a couple minutes early and say hello to those of you who are what we call early birds, who actually are on time by being before the time. And joining me today, of course, is Mr. Thomas Morelli. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Chuck. So just the two of us. Should I sing that song?
No, that's okay.
Great to be here. One of my favorite subjects. The reason we're in photography, one of the is we got hooked when we were younger, and the subject today is great fun. So I'm looking forward to it, and I appreciate everybody being here.
Yeah, and what we're going to talk about is really important. And I just wanted to mention that Todd is not going to be able to join us today because at the last minute he had another, what can we call it, a scheduling conflict come up. And so he said, since I'm really not going to do much talking anyway, because it's lighting basically, and I argued with him about the beautiful lighting he does with his cinematography that he does and his directing, and chief of photographer on different videos and stuff that he does. But he said, no, you won't miss me. I would just be there quiet anyway. So it's going to be just Tom and I, and we are going to have a ball because this is the stuff we really, really like. This is fun, beautiful. I just don't know what else to say other than that, you know, this is the real heart to what you do, is how you paint with the light. So with that, welcome to Photography Lighting with Gear, and how to create portrait and wedding photography that sells in 2023 and 2024 and beyond. And the key to this whole thing is that we have to remember, in fact, Tom and I were just talking about this, and he brought it up because it's so important to both of us. And what did you say about what our primary job with the lighting is, Tom?
That's right. Our primary job as portrait and wedding photographers is to make people look their best.
That's
because
right.
lighting is not just to illuminate, but also to enhance your subjects. And that's a lot we're going to talk about today is the tools to do that.
Yes. And don't ever forget it. That's the primary objective. That's it. Help them look. I like to say help rather than make.
Yes.
We want to help, but make is fine, but help them look their very, very best without looking manipulated, enhanced to where it does no longer look like them. We want it to look like them. This is portraiture. Even wedding photography is portraiture, where we have people who are not used to being in front of a camera and they want to look better than they really look without looking fake. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how to do it. And we just love it and adore it because this is the very backbone of what it is we do. And also, I just want to mention that it's extremely difficult to separate lighting from exposure because you're creating digitally, or in the old days with film, you're creating something on a medium that has to be able to see what your eye can see. So there's a very fine line of how we can keep these two subjects separated. And we just probably, I expect, as we get chatting here and showing you all these images, got lots of great images to show you and talk about. We will probably bring up exposure a couple of times. And then the other thing is that we're also going to talk about AI. You know, the shiny chrome, brand new thing in the industry and the world. And how does that apply to us as portrait and wedding photographers, professionals? And yes, it can be very handy, as Tom will be talking to you about when we get to that particular little section of one of the images that he created using AI, partially using AI, not the whole thing. So let's start right off here with the 6 types of lighting equipment. In fact, before I even do that, I think what I want to do is just this should be review, review, review. Don't turn the thing off, don't go away. But just in case there is any of you on here who just would like to know a little bit more about how we help people look their very best, because that's our primary objective, let's just take a look at this great photograph of Tom's that you'll see again in a few minutes, and just very quickly run down the basics of portrait and wedding photography lighting. And so the very first thing is the mask of the face. The mask of the face is the area of the face that contains the 5 major highlight areas: the forehead, the 2 cheeks, the tip of the nose, and the chin. That is where your subject's personality is. That is how you portray someone. Yes, we can have them golfing, or we can have them doing things that they're interested in. Yes, 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 yes. But the bottom line is, if you want their personality to jump off of the image and have the people who love this person just adore that photograph, you need to be very conscious of the mask of the face and pay attention to it at every minute. And then the second thing is the eyes. You know, we've all heard it, the eyes are the windows to the soul. Well, they are. And they're a whole bunch of this person's personality and the way he resides in his eyes. So not only do we need the mask of the face with a natural expression, but we also need those eyes. And we're gonna, as a portrait or wedding photographer, you need to pay very close attention to the catch lights in the eyes. I mean, this is one of the most, Tom and I, we're constantly looking at the eyes. Yes, the mask, yes, for sure. But boy, oh boy, because we want, if we can, we'd like 1 catch light only. And if we have 2 catch lights in an eye, then we're going to take one of them out in enhancing it later. We want 1 catch light. That gives him focus. That gives him a primary, he's really looking at us and talking to us with 1 catch light. And then where you have that catch light is very important. We wanted, if you look at his eyeball as a clock, the face of a clock, we want that catch light in a perfect world to be at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock. Now, sometimes this is why you can't just have this, set up and leave it where it is forever. You'll get someone with deeper set eyes, like he has deeper set eyes. So you can see the catch light, and it's between 10 o'clock or between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. It's not really exactly at 2 o'clock. It's at 2:30, 2:30. And that's because his eyes are deeper set. And so Tom just automatically, without even thinking about it, he just lowered that key light down just a teeny, and we're going to talk all about the key lights, don't worry. Lowered it down just a teeny bit so that he was sure to light those eyes, because man, do we need the light in those eyes. That is so important as a portrait and wedding photographer whose job it is to help people look their best. You got to have those eyes just sparkle. And no, we don't want to paint it in. Yes, Photoshop, yes. If you're good with Photoshop, you can do amazing things. I understand that. But we want it to be really there, that the face is so perfectly lit and his eyes are so perfectly lit that we actually can see the pupil of his eyes. We can see that catch light. We can see where it is positioned at 2.5, right in there, 2:30. So important. Tom, anything you want to add?
Well, we're going to be talking, of course, about all the lights that are going on here, because there are multiple ones. But Chuck, in reference to that, yes, when I'm positioning our main or key light that we'll talk about, first thing I look at is those eyes. Where is it? Is it low enough to get in and light up that area? Is it too high, too off to the side? Are there several? So you've got to be, all these things you're looking at and this, of course, is inside the studio, but this can also apply on location.
That's exactly right. This applies if you're using available light, ambient light, indoors, outdoors, window light, strobes, wedding photography, anything. This is the photography the basic background to everything that we do. And you have to be able, and it happens, the longer you're in it, the more you start looking at everybody when you're talking to somebody, meeting somebody at a party or something. You cannot help it. At least I can't. And I know Tom can't. We just look at it and we look at their teeth, we look at the lighting on their face, we look at their eyes, we think about what would I do? You just can't turn it off because it's what we do. You know, I mean, we want to help them look really good. All right, so we know that we're going to talk about the different lights, but one thing I want to comment on here also is what I call the 45-45 formula. And that's just a basic starting point, a rule of thumb that in most people's situation, I mean, and again, we're just talking faces now. Okay, when you get to a family portrait, you have to multiply this by all the different people, but you want to be aware of it. So that's why we're looking at one person here. 45-45, that means that as a general rule, as a starting point to help someone look really good, we want to have the key light 45 degrees to the right or the left of the camera, and then up 45 degrees from the face. But again, there we have to be cautious because we would like to get it as high as we can get it, as close to that 45-degree angle. If we took his nose and we drew a line up to that key light, it would be approximately 45 degrees. But then we have to pay attention very carefully to the eyes, as we talked about, and so you might have to find yourself lowering it down a little bit. By doing 45-45, you have got yourself a setup that's going to help someone look really good, because we know that in art, highlights come forward, shadows recede. Highlights come forward. If we want to make this a three-dimensional image that somebody just adores and loves and is happy, he is happy with the way he looks. In our day and age, we want people, 90% of the people want to have some weight taken off of them. Not everybody, but most of them. Okay, that's just the way our culture is at the moment, is that they're training you to look thin so that you can buy their product to look thin, whether it's makeup or diet or whatever. So, if we know that highlights come forward and shadows recede, then we know that we're going to have the side of his face that is closest to the camera, which in this case is his right-hand side of his face. We're going to have the right-hand side of his face be in shadow. And we're going to have the mask of his face, of course, in highlight. And that will tend to thin people. We call it narrow lighting. What else do you call it, Tom? I just always call it narrow lighting.
Yeah, sometimes they call it short lighting.
Yes,
that's broad. Broad lighting versus short. And
yep. So now,
yeah, of course. Oh, go ahead, Chuck.
No, continue.
I was just going to say, and of course, you mentioned something really important there. We are working with two-dimensional media, normally prints, but occasionally, even if somebody needs something, we don't do a lot of this, but it was going to be on a screen or when you're doing your projection appointment so people can see these. The lighting really is key to giving you that depth. So you feel like you could reach in behind their shoulder, you could reach around and behind their head. It's coming forward in the light areas, as Chuck said. Really important. That principle is part of the key to how you light people for flattering portraits.
Yeah, and keep in mind, our number one primary objective is to help him look as good as he humanly can look without looking completely fake and retouched. And we don't want to go that far. We just want him to look really good. I've always said, this goes back 45, 50 years. What I want is to have it look like we caught him on a really good day.
Yes.
He was right on that day, boy. That's what you want it to look like. So it's really him, and it's really him, and his mom and dad are going to have lumps in their throat and get chills when they look at this, because it is so much better than any photograph he has ever had taken. They cannot. There you go. Now you learn a little bit of presentation of the images without any pressure or trickery, and you're going to earn a great living in this business. And
I'll mention, Chuck, this was a high school senior, as you can tell from his age, and we did both portraits at his home as well as they wanted some more traditional in my studio, and it was a fantastic investment, and they did cry. I mean, we projected the first one, and they had tears. The mom and dad were both here. They are very sweet people, and it was really fun to do that. And he was just such a great guy to work with. He's now at MIT, I believe, very smart.
Oh, That's cool. Well, thank you. Because that's exactly what we want to have happen. That's our job. That's our job. If you want to earn a great living doing what you love to do, you're going to have to just eat and sleep this lighting, these posing and settings, environments, backgrounds. So now, having gone through, let's see. Oh, then there's one other really nice touch to this, which I'm sure those of you who are so much into this, like Tom and I are, have noticed, and that is this nice little specular right here on his face and over here. And it makes him look more manly, and it just gives more depth to the whole thing. And that's called what I call separation lighting. Tom has other names that he uses in addition to that, but I always just call it separation light. I do not call it a hair light, because a hair light sits up on top and aims down at the hair, and it's just supposed to light the hair. Well, we want way more than that. Are you kidding me? We are pros and we're charging a good amount of money. We're going to forget that. These are separation lights, and there are two of them, one on each side. And that's what you're seeing, is not only is his hair very nice, we can see the detail in his hair, but it just skims there, and it will on a girl too if they have short hair. And it just gives this nice little kick, if you will, which is probably why Tom likes to call them kicker lights and stuff. But we're going to talk more about that as well. So now, having basically talked about lighting, oh, transition zone. Oh, yes, because that's where we're headed. We're headed to the main light here. The transition zone is the area between the highlights and the shadows. We can see it right here coming down his face. So this side is highlight, and this side is shadow with a little kicker or separation light. And we know that the transition zone is that area that transitions from highlight to shadow. And in portrait photography, with 90–80% of the people you're going to work with, you're going to want that to be a soft transition zone, because that flatters people without accentuating any little issues they might have in their skin or anything. It's softer, it's more forgiving. Yeah, there'll be instances, I can't talk. There will be instances where you might want a hard transition zone and maybe a higher lighting ratio. Lighting ratio is the ratio between the highlights and the shadows. How much different, how far apart are they? And that's very important. In this case, I don't know, I'd guess it at a 2:1. I don't know, Tom, what would you say this lighting ratio is?
Yeah, that is the least contrast lighting ratio that I have. I kept this one very, very minimal. It's veering on flat light, but of course we're not using flat light, nor do we want flat light, but it's as light as you could get in a lighting ratio and not have flat light.
Yep. And that's very, for him, with his skin tones, I mean, everything is just this very complementary. But if the shadows go a little darker, then it might be a 3:1. We have three units of light on the highlights and 1 unit of light on the shadow. So we'd call it a 3:1. Okay. So that's the basic concept that you just keep honing and honing and honing until it's so embedded in you that you don't even think about it anymore. So now, having talked about that, we will now get into what we're going to talk about on the 6 types of lighting and how they kind of overlap in certain applications and everything. But if you had to break it down, Tom, to 6 types of lights that are your favorite sources of light regarding equipment, not regarding, I mean, it's all the same, but we're going to talk equipment here, gear. So why don't you just very quickly run them down the 6?
You bet. And, these all give different effects, but sometimes they are interchangeable, as you can see, or they overlap, as Chuck mentioned. But first is a 4x6 foot softbox in the studio as a main light. And does that say 4x6 inches? Did I put the wrong?
Oh, you did. I didn't even catch that. I'm sorry.
It's mostly 4x6 feet. The 4x6 inch one is a little small unless you're photographing mice. But just to give a quick history, back when 1998, 1999, as I was making the transition and testing the water of digital photography and had my first digital camera, they had not a great latitude and they had not a great ability to capture light and shadow in the same image. So I got the softbox to wrap around the person a little more, give a real pleasing soft light. It is big, it is bulky. It might not even fit where you work. We'll talk about that, but it has served me well with digital photography because it gave this nice, soft, warm, round, wraparound light. I also found in some situations in my camera room and on location that I have a 36-inch round called Octobox. They make them round, they make them different shapes, but this has 8 sides to it. It doesn't have 8 arms. It's not an octopus. It's in the studio, and it's good for both tighter spaces where I'm working, but also when I want a little more light control, as you'll see in some of the samples, I'm able to move this thing around because it is lighter and it is smaller than the 4x6 foot softbox. They both give a great light, and in most cases you couldn't really tell the difference other than if you look at the catch lights and so forth. Number 3, I do have a 28-inch square softbox, and I have other sizes too. They make them in all kinds of sizes. I just found this is the most portable. When I'm going outside to do family portraits or group portraits or senior portraits, or if I'm going to someone's home, it's not really practical to carry those larger lights in and out of doorways and in my vehicle to tear them down. So the 28 is just, I found, still a soft enough light to give me what I want, but also portable enough to put on a light stand and carry with me both outside. Has a little battery pack on there. Depends on the equipment. You can also have them now with built-in batteries inside the flash itself. So there's 2 different styles there. I also use what I call strip lights. They're just these long, skinny lights. They have a grid on them usually, and we might see that in one of the photographs, that keeps the light from spilling into the camera lens. And that's what we use for those accent lights. Some people, there's all kinds of different names, as Chuck had mentioned. And I don't do an overhead hair light anymore. I did that many, many moons ago, but as equipment got more available and sophisticated, the strip lights serve me well. And they really add that kind of kiss of light coming from the sides. It can illuminate the shoulders as well as the side of the face, just to give us some separation. So that separation is crucial. If you ever had clients show you photographs before where their hair or their shoulders or the clothing blended into a dark background, it just looked like a face. Yep. And that's a function of not having some way to either light the background or light the subject, so you had some separation. And then last, we'll do a little look at portable flash units. This is especially important if you're a wedding photographer, but there are times where light stands and larger softboxes just aren't practical. And so some of the lights are actually on camera or at least connected to a cord that's hooked to my camera, and some are off camera, but I have to hand hold them because I can't even take a light stand. I did a portrait on the Maine coast recently where I had to climb down some rocks, and that was a challenge. And if I had to carry a light stand, I didn't have someone with me helping that day. So having this handheld flash was great. I still held it up at that 45 angle that Chuck talked about earlier, and it worked out very well.
Right on.
And last, in some cases, particularly in either my studio, lighting up backgrounds, we have a background light, or there are cases, I no longer do the weddings that I used to do. I did about 1,000, I can't remember the last count, 1,208, something like that. And we used to have a remote flash that sometimes we put behind the couple or behind the families if it was in the church or in a home to light the background in that situation. And some people even use them outside and turn it back toward the subject and give some lighting on the hair in the back. That's a little more high-end sophisticated stuff, but it can be useful. So the background light is kind of the last key light that are, probably shouldn't use that term, important light that we use.
Yeah,
out of the studio.
Yeah, key light could throw them off there, right?
Yeah. Your Honor, I'd like to strike that.
Yes. All right, so now let's get into this stuff in the nitty gritty here. Most of the time we're using 4 or 5 lights, 6 lights right in there. And Tom just walked through each one of them. And now let's get into the details of the lighting and the gear he's using and how he accomplishes it. So you want to talk about this, walk them through this very quickly?
Yeah, I did this just as a kind of quick little view of what each light does. And again, this is in my studio, but the same type of theory applies to wherever you photograph someone, because sometimes some of these lights actually occur naturally, which we'll see a little bit later. So the
Yep.
background light, of course, explains what it does, lights up the background, separates it from the subject. The accent lights on either side come in, and the only danger you have to watch out for is to make sure it's not too hot or too overexposed on any skin on the nose, the tip of the nose. And then the fill light, in my case, and there are various types of theories on fill lights, but generally it's designed to be at least as much as possible, a shadowless light that fills in the shadows created by our main light. So you can see in the bottom center, the main light, which is the 4x6 softbox, illuminates her face, but that kind of harsh, that transition zone Chuck talked about, where the shadow on the cheek just goes almost black. The fill light comes in and creates a filling in that area, and you can vary how strong it is, so you can vary the difference between the light and the dark there, and that's what creates your ratio. So the end result you can see on the last box, which is all of those put together, and this is kind of my standard 45-45 setup. It's in the about the 11 o'clock position, and her eye catch lights are about the 11 o'clock position, and I usually start about there. And of course, we've talked in other programs about facial analysis. For some people, there are better lighting schemes and better angles and better poses, and there's a lot of things you can do to do corrective work. But this is where I'll start, and then we go from there if we need to do other types of lighting to help correct. But this is a good starting point, and those are the lights that are kind of standard in my studio, and then I will vary it from there.
Yep. And you just sort of hinted at it. So now is as good a time as any. As I mentioned, it's very difficult to talk lighting, especially with gear, without at least hinting at exposure, because it's such a crucial part of consistently capturing the person looking their very best and being able to capture it on a medium that can make a good photograph, a good image that they will love. So why don't you just walk us through in 5 seconds or less, highlights, shadows, kicker lights or separation lights. How do you meter? Or do you just, I mean, I know better than this, but I'm going to say it. Or do you just set everything up, take a quick image on digital and look at it?
Yeah, I look at it and I don't understand what my prints look awful. No,
yeah.
That doesn't look like what I saw on my camera. The back of your camera, other than the histogram, the back of your camera is not necessarily a very accurate view of what you got. It can be under or overexposed and you don't know it because the little LCD back, sort of corrects for that, or it's set differently. So just rely on a histogram when it comes to that. But more importantly, so you don't even have to look at the histogram as much as you're leaning on it, is in our portrait studio, these are all pre-measured lights, so they don't really change that much. Once in a while I'll check them just to make sure they're putting out the same amount of light as I want. But in this case, and every studio is slightly different, so your results may vary, but I like to photograph normally in my studio at f8 or 11, depending on what it is. Whether it's a family group, it might be a higher f16. If it's an individual, f8 is normally what I work at as far as the output of my lights that I'm comfortable with. And then from there, that's where my my main light or my key light is measured, and everything else is reflected on that. And it depends on if the hair is darker, I might have the accent lights from the sides be at 5.6 or 8 or 11, somewhere in there, or less. If it's very light hair, it might be less than that because it's the angle of incidence is the angle of reflectance. Is that right?
That's right.
And so it depends on how much is coming off their hair. And then the fill light is always, depending again what ratio we want, but normally it's a couple stops less, or 2 stops less, because I am looking to start with a 3-to-1 lighting ratio, 2-to-1 lighting ratio, depends on the face. If it's a face that I want to slim down a little bit, that higher ratio can help do that. But mostly with men, we're able to get away with that. Ladies, we don't want to have too harsh lighting because it's not that flattering. So the main light or the key light is where I start with my base. My background light depends on the background. If I'm lighting, if it's a darker background, I might have to bump it up to be equivalent to the main light. I might have to have more or less. So that is going to kind of be to taste as well. But
All
I
right, so
definitely, you want to measure them though, make sure you're getting the right exposure.
and you're using an incident light meter to measure it.
Correct. You got the little white ball there and you go
Yep.
and put it where the subject would be. I don't ever shove it in the subject's face. It's not polite.
Right.
Like, can you hold this? It's, you know, but I've pre-measured this before they come in, either with an assistant or I can remotely fire it. So I can just go over and hold it where their face is going to be and
Yep.
where the lights are in place and measure all of them from that spot to give me an accurate representation of what it's going to be.
Excellent. So now I just will mention, because I've gone this far without mentioning it, as you know, those of you who are on here live, you are welcomed and encouraged to ask any questions. If we didn't make something clear or there was something you're more particularly interested in that you'd like a little more information, just type it into the questions box and we'll be sure to answer your questions as we move forward. So here's the portrait we studied and talked about. And now you've got a real nice flavor for how he has done this. But just to make clear here, let's talk about the separation lighting. So you do your what ISO are we talking about here?
I set my cameras at ISO 160 for my studio lighting because of the size of my camera room, the quality of the image at that lower, what's considered a lower ISO. I know today's cameras can go up, you know, to what, to 50,000 or 100,000 ISO, but it still holds as good as they are. The higher the ISO at a certain point, the less smooth, the less quality. And again, I'm getting into the weeds here, but anything, for me personally, anything like 200 or under works great with my camera. So I just have it set. Plus film was 160. I will say that I used it at that lighting. So I kind of when I transitioned, I said, well, it works for film. Let's try it with the digital. That's kind of where I've stuck at it. Yep. Enables to use the f-stops that I want. And of course, if you're a newbie, you realize that in a case here where we're using flash lighting and not continuous lighting, which is a different subject, my shutter speed doesn't matter in terms of it's not going to affect the look of the photograph unless you got really low and then the ambient light. So I'm normally at 1/125th f8 ISO 160. That gives me what you see here.
Excellent. So now you set your light meter to 160. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you set the ISO on your light meter at 160. You go over where his face is going to be. You aim it back at what? The camera?
The camera.
Okay, so you and I are exactly the same. So
yes.
We aim it at the camera and then you fire the key light and you set the power or the distance the key light is away until you get the aperture that you're looking for. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, in the case of my 4x6 foot softbox, it is on a rolling stand, an old photogenic stand I've had for years, and I literally just go over and roll it back. Of course, now I'm so used to it, I know exactly where it goes, but pretty much within half a stop. But I will roll it forward or back till we get that, rather than change any power on the power pack itself. In some cases, if you're using a self-contained flash that has the power settings right on it with a little, you know, there's no battery, it's all inside, you can go over to that and up or down a little bit by, but really like eighths of stops now, and tweak that right from that light and go back and check again. So the method might be slightly different, but the idea is that you're increasing or decreasing the amount of light that's striking the meter.
Right, and if you're doing it the way we just described, that means you're exposing for the highlights, doesn't it?
Yes, which is important.
Which is different from when us old guys did film. We exposed for the shadows and printed for detail in the highlights. So,
and I'm about to say something very controversial, Chuck. Hang on to your hat. Certain things I will photograph, because this does come up and it has something to do with lighting. Some people ask, do you photograph in RAW or JPEG? If it's something that I know is going to be perhaps all over the place lighting wise, or if it's a family group and we're doing different groups in different lighting situations, wall portraits are probably involved, I will photograph, of course, in RAW, store those, and then the JPEGs are the ones we use to do our projection appointment. I have enough megapixels in my cameras now that for my baby plan and my high school seniors, unless there's a family group involved, I am photographing just in highest resolution JPEGs. and they're beautiful, and it's a lot less storage, because some people will say, well, I don't have to be that picky on my exposures because I'll fix it in RAW. Well, that takes time.
Yes.
You know, you don't want to be goofing around. You really want to treat it like we used to with film, which you only got 12 or 24 exposures, depending on the type of camera you had on the large format film. You couldn't fix it in post. You got what you got to a big degree. So rather than spend your time fixing things that could have been done properly, just get the exposure and the color balance correct in the first place, and you won't have to end up doing too much post-production in RAW.
All right, so let's say that you got a reading of f8. So you set your camera at f8, and then you turn off the main light and you turn on the fill light, and you aim the meter at the camera and you fire the fill light. And what do you want that to read?
So normally it is a stop, one stop or two stops below the key light, depending on what I want for a ratio. So forgive my math if I'm flying on my feet here. If we're getting f8 on the face and I want 5, 6 in the shadows filling in, those kind of, that's our 1 to 2, I believe, Chuck, right? That's our 1 to 2?
Yep.
Yeah. And then if I want a little more dramatic, I would drop it down to f4 to give us the 1 to 3 ratio and so forth. So, and there are times, it depends on the subject, I have gone quite high on the lighting ratio, but normally it's something special or a male face that we want to show ruggedness, or, you know, they have a lot of experience lines, they call them, and they want to show that off, or it's a character portrait or something. So I don't do as many of those. So normally I keep the lighting ratio in that 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 area, just to keep that flattering. The idea of flattering is most important.
Yep. And here's what we mean by that: the 2 to 1, 3 to 1. When his fill light, as you're going to see in just a second, is just very soft, almost no specular light at all, no speculars, and it covers the entire image here, the whole thing. Okay, that's 1 unit of light. Okay, now we know that light is additive. Therefore, when we then have 2 units of light, or another on top of the 1, we're hitting him with another one because he set the shadow area to 5, 6, and he's got the main light set to f8. Then that is going to mean that this highlight mask of his face is going to have 2 units of light, 1 from the fill and 1 additional one from the main. Okay, and the main is twice as powerful. So that's how you get your ratio of 2 to 1, 3 to 1. That's what we mean when we're talking about it. Enough about exposure. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Okay. And this again, same exact main light, same everything. Anything you want to add before we move to the next one?
Yeah, this is of course a full-length muslin background rolled out, and when we're talking brides, of course, they pay a lot of money for these gowns, so we want to make sure our light, whichever direction we're using to light the face, skims across and gives that bodice and that lovely work, chance to show up by creating little shadows on it. In this case, as you can see, the light is a little higher ratio due to that 4x6 softbox is off to our right, lighting her face, and just, in using that box allows me to light properly her head to toe. A smaller, more specular box would be good for maybe a head and shoulders, or 3/4 length would be adequate. But in this case, this thing really evenly lit her from her feet to the top of her head.
Right on. And if we could zoom in close up on her face, you would see the catch lights exactly where they're supposed to be. All right, so now we get to a family. And what this is a whole bunch of individual faces. That's what this is. That's just what we just talked about, only multiplied by a bunch of people. You want to talk at all about this?
Yes, family lighting such as this in my studio is supposed to be boring. And what I mean by that is we don't get into, unless again there's a reason for it, a real high dramatic lighting ratio. We just want every face, and they're spread apart, so it's a little harder to be directional. Say, I'm going to light just this face this way. We have to light them all the same. It's one of those compromises where you go, this person, I could corrective light them a little bit better, but they're in this group. Exactly. So I'm going to have to sort of balance that cost benefit ratio, as they call it. So This is just the 4x6 softbox. My fill light, there's obviously a background light behind them lighting up the background. And there is, as you can see in the hair, some separation light going on, because especially in the darker hair over there, it's really important that that young man on the far right didn't blend into the background. So that has all 5 lights going, really. The separation light on the other side isn't quite as apparent, but it is there.
And this is such a great example of ESP. The great late Donald Jack taught me that, and he said, always remember ESP. And I said, oh yeah, the ESP, that subconscious conversation, people can talk to each other, you know, mentally on some. No, he said, expression sells photographs. And I'll never forget it. I mean, to this day, that was more than 55 years ago. I still remember it. I remember the day he told me. I remember his expression on his face. ESP, expression sells photographs. You look at each one of these individual people, their faces are greatly lit. We have catch lights in the eyes, and their expressions are just fantastic. Very nicely done. Next.
If you want your clients, especially your high school senior girls and parents, to think you're brilliant, Chuck, I've often told them, you know, because it allays a lot of their fears because they don't know how to say this. I'll say the 2 biggest things that will ruin or make a portrait perfect is your hair. They're like, oh, you're right, boy, my hair always looks messed up. And your expression. If it's not real, portrait's not any good. So I'm going to make darn sure your hair and your expression are perfect. They're like, oh, that's good, because I was kind of worried about that. I don't like myself in photographs. So those, I learned that from you, ESP, many years ago, and it still is applicable today.
Yeah, thank you, Donald Jack. All right, so this one you're still using the 4x6 foot key light, right?
Yeah, you know, when we photograph newborns, little ones in our baby plant, 3 months or so, a little older, they can start to lay on their tummy, and the lighting's slightly different. But on the ones where they're just unable to do anything else and lay on their back, I just literally try to emulate window light, because some people photograph newborns in people's homes and use window light, which is fine. But this, I just bring the softbox in fairly close, and that's the only light. There is a fill light, but it doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't have to, because the main light really kind of comes in and wraps around. I mean, it's literally up over the baby. We're not looking for corrective lighting, high lighting ratios. We just want that peaches and cream skin tone, smooth baby skin, and then go for expression. So when I do any kind of baby photography, particularly in this newborn case, there's not a whole lot of, okay, I got to move the lights now, and now we'll move this light. No, we're working on expression, getting the baby to sleep, maybe getting the baby to smile. You told some of my best baby jokes here, and the baby smiled for me. But so that one light does almost all the work in this case, and it's because it's such a broad light source.
Right on. Beautiful. All right, so now that's the 4x6 foot main light softbox. Now we move to the 36-inch Octo softbox. You want to talk a little bit about that? And we can see it in these examples here, but let's go ahead and move forward. There's an image of it there on the right-hand side. That's what it looks like right there, okay? And you want to talk just how you use that and why?
Yeah. You bet. And, you know, in some cases, if you go, boy, a 4x6 softbox, I can't get that through my door. This is the next best thing. The 3 foot wide round or octobox is still an amazing, soft, beautiful light, but it is more portable, obviously. So I can put it into the corner in my studio, in this case, and do a little more side, or some people call it rim lighting or backlighting, that is able to come in and skim over the subject. And I just thought this was a real dramatic image. They had seen one. This client came in and with his parents, and we did some family groups, but they said, we'd really like for our son, before he goes off to Japan, to have something very dramatic. And they had seen something similar to this, and that's how we got this. But that octobox, now, as you can see from the catch light, he has a brim on his hat. They call it a lid, right, Chuck? You're the that a lid?
Me? I can't remember that, but I think that's what they call it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he says
long time, Tom.
Yeah. And so I have to move that octobox down into the front a little bit. So you see the catch light in his eye is kind of right in the middle, but it had to be there, because without that, he'd just have dead eyes, you know.
Yep. And so, you can't have dead eyes. No. And think so where he would be. Think where Tom would be if he didn't have that fill light.
Right.
I mean, exactly. You'd lose all the detail, Well, okay, a little bit on the front. You could see the buttons and stuff and the little metal there and stuff, but you got, see, this is using everything we've talked about. It's just a different type of key light, and that's why we're talking about it. Anything else, Tom, before we move on?
I did pop just a tiny bit of separation light on his hair in the back. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a little light coming from that side that we'll see a little more detail about later on. But the Octobox is just a nice, fairly lightweight way. It has an Alien B flash in it. It's a portable kind of flash. They have different heads, so it'll fit almost any kind of studio strobes. But I just like to be able to pick it up and move it. And if I had to give up my 4x6, I'd still be able to create beautiful portraits with this thing, because it will give you that soft wraparound light as well. But being able to move it where the 4x6 won't go is very convenient.
Right on. Very good. All right, with the gentleman with the guitar, talk about this one again.
Yeah,
Look at that narrow. Do you see a something common? Narrow light, narrow light, narrow light, or short light. Okay, the side of the face that is towards the camera is in shadow. That doesn't mean it's invisible or it's in total darkness. No, but it's in shadow. Go ahead, Tom. Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt because you're doing a great job here.
No, I've always valued your guidance for the only last 35 years or something.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
This mom, when we met, she said, "Oh, he's a talented guitar player, high school senior." And she said, "And I walk into his room sometimes," and she started to cry. "It'll make me cry, Chuck." And she says, "I see him sitting there playing, and I think I won't always see that." So that gets me. And so she said, "Can you?" And he has his computer screen on, so I sort of emulate a little bit like the light from the screen coming. I really wanted to go to their home and do this one, but she's like, "His room's a mess." She wouldn't let me do it. But I said, "I understand. I've had 2 teens myself." And so anyway, the Octobox let me kind of go back in that corner again and short light this. In this case, it really was kind of artist's choice and taste. I could have taken that fill light way down and really, knocked the detail out of his face. But I just thought that expression and his concentration on what chord he was playing and so forth was important. So I did a little higher lighting ratio on some, but this one was the one that this is a wall portrait in their home. And
beautiful.
And they absolutely loved it.
Oh, I'll bet.
I wish I was that cool in high school. That kid was cool.
All right, talk about this one.
Yeah, so, a lot of these collages that I do really require 3-dimensional looking lighting. So as I blend them, they're not just flat. So the edge images are all lit in those cases by a thing called, we're going to talk about strip light, which is a thinner light. It's easier to control either than the Octobox, but we'll get to that. But on the one facing us, I really preferred to show his muscles and the jaw strength in his face and just this drama in the lighting, so that it really is more a fill light illuminating the face, and the light coming in from the side is able to just get those cheekbones in that face and kind of push it forward. So it fits in with the rest of the lighting. If everything here was flat lit or lit more traditionally as with a portrait, it just wouldn't have the effect, because when I go in to blend these things together, I have to sort of shade out certain parts of him, and the dark parts, as Chuck talks about, recede, and his face proceeds with those light areas. So again, this is kind of like cooking. It's the taste. You might have higher or lesser lighting ratios, and how you blend them, it's all up to you. That's the fun of it. That's your choice as an artist. But this is a good starting point where I really give a hot light on the sides of the face coming in from each side, and that can be done with an Octobox or a strip light, but it's very effective. And I do a lot of these with typical sports as well as musicians.
And I'm dying to ask you other questions, but I'm not going to, because it's not on the exact lighting that we're talking about. So I'm going to just move right forward.
Save those. We can do those again some other time.
Yeah, and nobody's asked a question, so I'm going to assume we can move forward. So let's move on to this one, because this is kind of an interesting case, but it's using the Octolight, right, as your key light.
Yes. Again, portability was the case, but I wanted something bigger than my 24-inch square portable box that I take outside normally, because I knew we had a big light kind of not a big room, but an airy room. There is some window light coming from the left from a deck that's out there, but it really wasn't sufficient for proper lighting. Just to give you a why are we doing it this way in the first place? I had photographed the family at sunset. They loved that. That's a portrait on their wall. But they said, we want to have something in the day of the life of, the baby's always at mommy while mommy's trying to get ready for work and she's trying to vacuum, and dad is in the National Guard and he's a musician and a director of the National Guard band here in this area. His daughter on the left there wants to be a singer. So she had this whole story.
Yeah.
And she said the metronome kind of sets the day. We get that thing clicking and that's how we're rushing around. And I just want to show how parents have to be multitaskers all day long and still smile through it all. So this was a lot of fun, and it took a lot because we, getting everybody to do everything at the same time that we wanted without photoshopping it was crazy. So the box is off to the upper left, and I was recalling what I did here. I did bring an alien bee light that I had behind me, behind the camera, to bounce off the white ceiling as a bit of a fill.
Yep. There you go.
Because the Octobox would just be too harsh by itself.
Right on.
So I slowed the shutter speed down a little bit, and a lot of the ambient light from that window was able to peek in a little bit. You can see the shadows on the plant there, but this lady works at a bank, and of course he's well known. So this portrait brought me a ton of business. This is a couple of years ago, but people just thought it was so different,
Oh, and it's so, look at the two children. They just look so spontaneous. It's fabulous. I love that.
And the mom said that the little girl that sings, she's a couple of years older. The mom says to me, "You got to take care of yourself. You're doing her senior portraits." And I'm like, "Oh boy." Yeah. They'll be wheel me in. Anyway.
Yeah. I might have to use a cane to get around, but I'll do it. All right. So now we move to the next key light, and that is this portable. He's got a 36, I think you told me the other day, and then a 28. We're going to talk mainly about the 28 inch because it's more portable, but still gives soft light because we're painting with the light. And our job is to help every single person look absolutely the best they've ever looked. Help them look fantastic. Therefore, this is the equipment we're going to use. See how this all, we're running these businesses like businesses, not hobbies, businesses where we absolutely are consistent. We know if we use that particular piece of equipment as a key light and we have the right lighting ratio with a soft transition zone and narrow lighting, we know we're going to have something that's going to they're going to love. So we're not, we're not talking about 25 or 30 different pieces of equipment here. We don't need that much. So let's talk about your 28-inch square here. Let's just take this one close up and talk about that.
Yeah, you bet. And again, the smaller the light, the more specular it can get. And that basically means that it could be a little harsher light. It could leave shadows that are a little more hard edge, such as the one on her chest from the collar she's wearing there. But her expression and the other things we're going to talk about kind of overrode that. The parents love this. It's on their wall at home. High school senior, obviously. 36 and 28 happen to be two sizes I saw over the years that were portable looking, that fit my alien bees on a light stand that I was able to take outside. But I found that sometimes the wind, if I was working alone that day, I didn't have a parent with me to hold the light stand, the wind tended to take the 36-inch one a little more like the Flying Nun. Remember that? She had the habit that caught the wind. And so I'd be chasing a light going, "Excuse me, folks, I have to go get that." So the 28 is a little less of a, area for the wind to strike, but it still gives soft light. You're not using some on-camera flasher. Some people used to gosh forbid, but a little pop-up flash in the top of the camera. Obviously you never use that. Yeah. This still gives beautiful light. I can put it at that 45 as a starting point, as Chuck said. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. The things going on here that I really want to point out, though, is that the background is backlit. So there's my backlight. The sun is hitting the trees. So, okay, there's my backlight.
Gorgeous. And I love what it's doing to her hair and shoulders.
Exactly. I was going to say, and then that little bit that does come through, and we make sure it's not too dappled, so there's not hot spots on the hair. It still has to have enough diffusion through those leaves that it backlights the hair. So the accent lights are on the hair and the shoulders and the arms, and we've got background lit. So now all we need is a fill light. Well, the sky is our nice ambient soft fill light, as long as the sun's not in it, pointing at her face, which is not.
Yep.
So that last thing we have to do, we've sort of built that base, is now let's bring in our key light or our main light, which is the softbox, and let's light that face. And it's done the same way. It's a little different than in the studio because now we're worried about or concerned with ambient light. So we'll go in and do an ambient light measurement, which if I'm working at 160 or 200 or whatever, not to get too many numbers, you don't have to write this down right now. We get that correct, and then whatever f-stop I'm working at, and that is the correct exposure for that, I will go up 1 from that, depending on what we want for a lighting ratio. So if it says it's, you know, you're photographing at 160 at f8, fine, I'll set that key or main light at f11 and expose for that, and it falls into place. And again, there's a little variation as the sun goes in and out, but you
now
know,
that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's different.
Yeah, there's different ways because you can use the ambient light as your key light and use your softbox as a fill. But I just I usually like the results, and they're more consistent in skin tones. This girl, in every photograph that we did outside, her skin tone, exposure, and color was identical in every pose because they all were exposed for that particular key light. Even if the background changed, even if the sun went in and out and the color temperature changed a bit, it didn't matter. Her face stayed the same, which is really the most important thing. So normally I use that as my key light only, and the rest is exposures are based on that, you know.
And see, if he had not had that light, okay, because I mean, all of us on this event today, we all deal with light and exposure all the time. You got the sunlight coming through the trees in the background, and then you do not have your 28-inch or whatever little portable softbox. Look at her eyes. We can see where the catch lights are. You see them? They're both there in both eyes. That's very important. You have to have both eyes. You want to see those catch lights. If you can't on one of them, that means that that eye is not getting the same amount of light as the other side. It's not going to look right. They're not going to be happy. They won't even know why. But without that key light, her eyes would have been just dead.
Right.
Totally dead. Just beautiful, Tom. Beautiful. All right. Family portrait.
Yeah, and this is an example. I think in putting this together, I had recalled that this was the larger 36-inch softbox. Same idea though, as far as exposure for the surroundings, and then basing what the surroundings proper exposure was. Camera on a tripod. Might add that has nothing to do with lighting, but put that camera on a tripod, because this ended up as a 2024 or 20, I can't remember which, but it was sharp as a tack. You know, it's still flattering, but it was in focus and no motion blur. But again, exposure for the fill light being the sky, and then my and this is fairly flat lighting. This is not corrective lighting or anything, but I just put that, in this case, I believe it was on the upper right on the light stand. And I always start, you know, it's a little harder outside. As you may know, if you work in the studio, we have modeling lights, they're called, that are inside the flash head, so that as you move it around, you can see where the shadows in the face and the catch lights will be. Outside, it's really hard to see catch lights unless you take an exposure and then look on the back of your camera and just see, where those catch lights go? Okay, they look like they're in a good spot. Or if it's giving you spots in the glasses, which this was not. But 45, again, as Chuck had mentioned, is the place I start usually with these. That's usually pretty darn close to this, since we're going for a little different effect than corrective lighting or dramatic lighting.
But again, you're only using one light. That's the portable softbox light. And they do, Tom, you know, as you get older, you'll learn these things. They do make little bags that you can fill with water, or you can use sandbags. You know, they do make things that you could stick on the stand, you know. I'm being funny.
I do have some of those, Chuck. I have several that they actually have like the little danger markings, like they're blue bags made by the light stand company. You fill them with sand or weights. And they have like the little danger sign. The only thing is they're about, I don't know, 10 pounds a piece. And you got to carry them. I don't know.
That's right. That's right.
So,
and when we're doing location,
usually I have an assistant, so it's okay. You
know, see, I've got Sherry, and so between the two of us, you know, we carry, and we normally fill them at the client's residence. So I like the water ones because you can just get a hose and fill them up real quickly, you know. but then you drain it out and you can carry them back real easily. That's a whole
And
nother
it's like
subject.
having a canteen too. So just think.
It is. You've got a canteen if you need it. Okay, and then again, look at the soft lighting. You can see it on every one of these images, but the one on the right, of course, is being more close up. You can see how soft that is. You want to talk about that very quickly?
Yeah, the heat of a wedding photography time, and of course, if you plan your weddings properly, you'll have more time to work with. But occasionally, this one on the right, we'll start there, was at a country club, and some right before going in, we'd done a lot of photographs. I said, "Oh, can you get one right here?" And so I had this light, and I had an assistant with me, and we're carrying that light around, and just placed it at the 45 upper right there. The light, fortunately, was just overcast enough that I was able to get away with it. There's a little hot on his cheek there, and on his nose, but because it's consistent light, this really is what it looked like when it came out of camera.
Wow.
I kept it kind of light and airy because they like that style. Wedding trends are always subject to see people see something and, oh, I like that light airy look. So I didn't overexpose it. I exposed it properly, but in this case, I gave it to them. I preset some of the presets I used, lightened it up a little. But the important thing, the ones on the left, kind of a collage, just a collection of things I put together that had all used that portable on a light stand 24-inch softbox. And the boy and girl sitting on the upper right there, one of the things sometimes that people make a mistake, in my opinion, is they'll put the softbox on the shadow side as a fill light, and it just flattens the light. It doesn't look right. So I always put it, and we used to do this reflectors. If we had a bride and groom by the window in a church, you didn't put the reflector on the shadow side. You still brought it in front by the window and it wrapped the light around. So in this case, we're bringing those soft boxes in 45, but on the lighter side. So they're facing open sky there. It's just that this gets rid of those raccoon eyes, the shadows in the eye sockets and so forth. So the little boy on the bridge there, same thing. There was ambient light, but I brought that in from the right, and he was just a little ball.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And that's okay. If 1-year-olds, you got to give them something to hang on to, because other than that, they're out of there. They take off.
That's right.
So I always try to find little helpers, posing aids to help with that.
Yep.
All right. High school senior.
Any comments on this one?
Yeah, high school senior. And this is a case where, again, to create some depth, we had enough ambient light going. It was kind of an overcast day, but bright overcast. So you get a little that rim light on the top of his hat, and the top of his shirt, his arms, and so forth. But I just brought the softbox over on the other side of his bow and arrow setup there. So it's to our right and kind of out of frame to light his face. Matter of fact, it created a little shadow on his chin that I probably could have photoshopped out from the arrow. But that sort of tells us where that light is coming from. And it's just to give us a very subtle lighting ratio. It's not big, but enough to pop just his eyes and his nose and the concentration on his face as he is aiming. I told him, wait till I'm way over here and then do that. So
yeah,
I got out of the way quickly.
And
but I did
these speculars that are coming off of the bow,
right?
Are those from your key light, or are those from natural skylight?
Those are from the key light, I believe. It looks like they got bumped up with that. And I do this particular pose a lot with, in here in Maine, a lot of hunters, not all boys too, boys and girls, but they'll dress in like camo or in their hunting gear, and they'll bring their rifle or they'll bring their bow and their dog off, and then they'll kneel in the long grass on location somewhere where they hunt, and we'll always light it from the back like that. It's real dramatic looking. And again, you could I could make this almost look like it was after sunset if I really stepped up my shutter speed and darken that area down that's exposed for the sun, the sky.
Yep.
So that's when it gets fun, is once you know what you're doing, you can start going, I can play with this a little bit and see what I like the best, or what my artistic eye says is a dramatic, interesting image.
Right on. Now this brings us to the kicker lights, what I call separation lights, which we've talked about before. But here you can see on the right-hand side there, you can see how they have louvers on them. And actually they're louvers both horizontally and vertically. And that's to protect any of the skew rays that come out of those lights from hitting the front element of your lens and losing contrast and causing all kinds of problems. Anything else you want to mention about these before we show a couple of images?
No, that's their primary use once in a great while. If I'm doing one of our collages and we want to do some backlighting on someone throwing a ball or playing a guitar, I'll use just one of those and maybe a little fill light. So I get rid of my main and other background lights and stuff. I just use one of those and my fill light, and to light the face. I'm pointing at my face. You can't see me. To light the face.
That's right. No cameras today.
But 85, 90% of the time, they stay right where they are in this application.
Yep. Very nice. Very nice. So we take a look at this absolutely gorgeous pose number 3. Beautiful image. I mean, let's see. How can we pick this apart? We can't. I mean, look at that. Her expression. Look at the beautiful catch lights in both eyes. And her eyes, again, are a little deeper set. So he had to lower the key light down enough to where he could get these beautiful catch lights in both eyes. You can see the pupil of her eye. I mean, you can see everything here. And then of course, the whole point of this one is the separation lights, the kicker lights coming from each side, and the beautiful effect that they're having. Anything to talk about here, or can we move on?
Yeah, the only thing I would do to this, finish it up, we got a few stray hairs. I didn't bother to do those because I just grabbed this image. The hair kind of bowing out near our right, her left eye. I clean up that kind of stuff. Just takes 2 seconds to do. But one thing I wanted to point out is you mentioned expression. The mother, I said that day as on photograph, I said, your hair is beautiful. She goes, yeah, she's real proud of her hair. And I said, oh, it's got nice sparkle. Well, this girl loved that. I said, we're going to light your hair. It's sparkling. It looks beautiful.
Right on.
So when they came in for the projection appointment, this was one of the first ones they saw. The mother starts to cry and she goes, somehow, because the daughter didn't want to smile. She was a little reticent. She has braces, actually, now that I think of it. She had braces. And so we did some smiling with braces, but she said, you caught my daughter in a way I never could, because she wouldn't pose for me and doing things. She's crying. She goes, that's her. She says she's very introspective. She's not a real cheese type of girl. She goes, you caught her. I mean, she just, it was great. Yeah, I mean, we hugged and it was great. It was and a nice investment.
That's what it's all about. I always tell my clients that I don't work for the money. I'll take it.
Yep.
But I work for the tears and the hugs.
Yep. You bet.
Right on. Beautiful image there, Tom. All right. So that brings us to this really cool one. Very nice. And again, you must be using those, what do you call those things? Those strip lights, I guess you call them. Yeah. You want to talk
about
this?
That's what the manufacturer calls them. We call them accent lights or separation. First of all, I wish I had thought when we put this together. I photographed this little guy in my baby plan.
and that's
he loved
cool.
John Deere tractors. And so at 2 years old, they brought him back, and he's got a little green John Deere tractor, and is wearing overalls, and he's got his foot up on it, his hands in his overalls, like he's a big deal, So when we went to his home to do his senior portraits on location, because he did come to the studio for some sports ones, they now have a full size, I'm talking the big boy John Deere tractor, backhoe type. It's huge. So we photographed him standing there, and he still had the little one from his childhood. And it was, the mother's standing there, the father's standing there, they're bawling. They're like, they brought up the photograph I had done. And they said, we still have this and we love it. It's one of our dearest possessions. And now look, he's next to he's a grown-up boy next to his grown-up tractor. So it's very cool. But this guy is a multiple sports person. You can tell, lacrosse and hockey and football, of course, and he's a champion in all of them. So he wanted to show those things off, and we did do a portrait, we call it, where there are multiple images in one, but they also really wanted something like this. So we just use those separation or accent lights on the sides to just throw a little more dramatic look, again, on the cheeks. In the middle portrait, his muscles and the shoulder pads. And so they're not designed to be peaches and cream, soft, flattering portrait. It really is designed still to make him look good. He's handsome. He did smile later, but the parents are like, no, this is him. He's got his game face on. We want that. So those lights were key to helping step up that feeling of, this is not some soft portrait. This is designed to be, I'm tough, I'm ready to play.
Yeah. This is just fantastic. And there's so many things going on here. For example, notice how he's got the two outside images facing inward, not outward. So it holds the eye within this entire ensemble of 3 images. And then the lights, of course, are the narrow lighting coming from the center, coming out on the left-hand side and then coming out on the right-hand side from behind, as if it was behind this center image. Love it. Very nicely done. All right, so now this is a special case, but we wanted to include this because this is AI. And you say, AI, uh-oh, what do you mean? So you want to talk about this?
Yeah. First of all, the person, the boxer, this lovely lady, is a real person. She is not AI generated.
Right.
Just so you know. She's a friend of mine who owns, she and another gentleman own a boxing and workout company, and they take in everybody, young kids. It's really designed for cardio health. They do have some people that go on to box in championship boxing, and she's actually won in her weight category, females, some New England and East Coast championship a few years back. So I made sure I took good care of her so she didn't knock me. But anyway, so we did a bunch of different things. She wanted some with her belt stuff, but I just happened to grab this one. And because she's like, do you have any kind of like thing to make me look like I'm in the ring or anything? So I'm thinking, I could go online and find some royalty-free image, because there are plenty. But just for the heck of it, I put this into the latest edition of Photoshop, which now, as you may or may not know, has a feature called generative fill. And so I just told it, fill the background with what it would look like from a boxing ring perspective. And I literally said, with 2 lights in the back. And it gave me 3 or 4 variations. And then I hit this one. I said, she's like, oh, that's cool. That's what it looks like. So I said, all right. So that is totally computer generated out of my Word description. I did put a little bit of a soft filter on it to give it some depth, because all those faces were sharp and clear when it first came back. And I didn't want it to have that. So I did tone those down a bit to keep the emphasis on her, because sometimes the artificially generated faces can be kind of strange.
Yes, they certainly can.
And it does struggle with fingers. If you just wrote, fill this blank with a model or someone holding an apple, the fingers, there might be, 7 fingers or 3.
Yep.
So
they're triple jointed fingers. It's kind of scary.
It is, and
they'll work it out. They'll get it.
Oh, go ahead.
They'll work out the details eventually.
Yeah. Well, I was saying that we, fooling around with it, which is kind of fun to fool around with, but don't waste too much of your time. You got better things to do with your family. But anyway, I'm talking to our audience. There's amazing things you can, and of course, a lot of artists now are saying, "Boy, what's this going to take me?" When they got like graphics designers to companies rather than stock photos, which since we don't have to worry about how the stock and royalty image photo business is going to be, at least not in our business, because we're portrait photographers photographing individuals who are unique. Rather than somebody says, I would like a big photograph of an apple orchard at sunset in Bolivia.
Yeah.
And this thing will generate it in high res, and they make a print and no person was involved. And that's not going to be good for the landscape type people that are trying to sell those. I'm saying it's going to replace it, and that's not what today is about. But I just want to mention that, it is here and you can investigate it, and sometimes it can help save some things. If she said, for example, the last thing I'll say on this, I love this, but I want it to be horizontal. I literally could go in and say, add enough background to this to make it a horizontal, and it would draw more of what you see there on the edges. Right. It's not always perfect, but it can be a lifesaver.
Yeah. And also, of course, the reason this is here is because you're using those 2 strip lights, one on each side.
Exactly.
And notice the catch lights in her eyes. Okay. And this was done in studio, so I'm assuming you have your nailed down fill that's up in the ceiling.
Correct. And used just a little higher lighting ratio.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But you can see, because these strip lights are narrower, you can see how the transition zone is sharper. It's a little sharper. It's not like on off, but it's sharper than the more pleasing 4x6 foot or 36-inch Octobox. But beautifully done, Tom. Really nice. And of course, this one again, you're using those lights. You want to talk about that real quickly?
Yeah. Now this is still the 4x6 softbox is my key light here, but I provided this because the back of the gown and also the far left side of her face, our right, but her left, I used the accent lights on the side, and they're small
Mhm.
enough that you can kind of tuck them into the corners of the studio. So it still lit the back of her hair on our left, the back of her gown. So it still had some details that the 4x6 softbox might have missed in shadow. And then that little bit of light on her face from the far right strip just gave us a little kiss of light on those cheeks and on that forehead, just to
Yep,
give it some sparkle.
it's very dimensional, her face. That's very nice. All right, so now we go to portable light. When a light stand or assistant is possibly not available. So you're going to be hand holding it above and off to the side, or for what I prefer, I always prefer, if I can possibly do it, I want an assistant with me because they're so very helpful. And Sherry, of course, is so good because she nitpicks at everybody's outfits. She does everything like that. So I just love working with her. But in this case, yeah, if you're on your own and you want to add something, this is a way to add it, and it works quite well. So you want to talk about a couple of these?
Yeah, well, first of all, equipment, since we're talking equipment too, I have one's called a flash point. I have several flashes. I have a Nikon SB500, but this flash is the latest one I bought, which is a flash point, but Godox makes them, Molite, several lights that make them. The thing that's good about them is A, the battery's built in, B, they have lots of power, or depending on the model, as powerful as an in-studio strobe. And also the cord can be held, so you can hook it to your camera and you can hand hold the thing up to the side. Again, try to
Yep.
go as close as again to 45. They also will have light modifiers. That's a magnetic head, so you can add diffusers. There's all kinds of stuff you can add to that if you want to soften the light up a little bit. I wouldn't use it direct as it's pointing there in that illustration. That would just be too harsh a light. So that normally has some sort, I don't have a photo of it here, but there's a couple different diffusers that I put on that. The idea here is though, that again, you saw this gentleman earlier with his new bride. We're outside, it's overcast. Rather than haul stuff outside, because this was at like the reception was going on, and they said, oh, we didn't, well, let's do one with the girls. And they, you know how weddings can be, Chuck, and chaos, controlled chaos. So we ran outside and by the golf course and dodged the golf balls flying by in the background, and it just handheld 45. I can't even tell if it showed up as a catch light, but enough. So again, we're avoiding those raccoon eyes. I did have an assistant. I always have an assistant at weddings, always, but the assistant was inside talking to the bride, probably saying, okay, next we're going to do this or whatever. So that flash has enough that I could go out. It's consistent in its lighting temperature, so it's balanced. So again, you can, and some of these are TTL, it's called, through the lens, so it will talk to your camera. And I happen to use a Sony for this one, and it will do the exposure that way, or if you want, you can use it in manual and figure it out. But a lot of times on the fly, the TTL works perfectly well for me in a situation like this. But again, if you're a wedding photographer, you may be used to this. We're trying to avoid having the camera being, the flash being on the camera and directly photographing into their face.
Yep.
Same thing here. You can see her little catch lights. Now her catch light's about at 1 o'clock there, somewhere in that area. And that's where that flash you just saw is handheld, my right hand up to the right and above, and handheld camera. And this is nice. Again, seniors tended over the last couple of years to like that real light, airy look, especially if it was commensurate in the key of their hair or their fair skin tones and so forth. So that's kind of where this came from. You know, one thing also, if I can mention this just real quickly, it's not a Photoshop seminar. Photoshop's added a lot of stuff. I have people sometimes ask for those really, really soft backgrounds, like big time bokeh, like a 600 millimeter lens would offer. And I don't normally use those.
Yeah.
But Photoshop, if you go into neural filters, it will give you varying degrees, depending on how you set it, those soft backgrounds, so you look like you took it with one of those lenses, even if you don't own one. And I've had clients that have asked for that, and when we did their projection, they're like, oh, that's perfect. That background really pops them out, and they like that. So Photoshop's offering some new things. And what I wanted to say is, don't go out and buy a bunch of new lenses.
Yes, definitely.
Photoshop's doing a lot more stuff. You don't want to, it doesn't take but 2 seconds to do that. I just want to mention that soft background look is big with a lot of high school seniors. Same thing here. This lovely lady, obviously expecting, and she had this real dramatic features, and her personality is extremely this outgoing, loving, Mae West almost type person, just a terrific person. I did her high school senior portraits, and then she got married. I did their wedding, and then here we are. So I think this is
Yeah.
baby number 4. But again, it was freezing out. She wanted to be outside. It was not. It was so I took my handheld and just used it to fill in some of the shadows. We don't see her eyes obviously because she's looking down, so I didn't worry too much about catch lights. But I still was up to the left in this case, where the light source of the sky was mostly coming from, and added a little bit to that with that off-camera flash with a little diffuser on it, just to fill in the shadow on her cheek.
Yep.
And then the dreaded noontime.
Yeah.
Now, 99.9999999% of the time, if you charge enough and you meet with people, your clients will trust what you say. Because I've actually had people say, well, I'm listening to you, I'm paying you enough, which is a sign of respect. Okay,
It is.
so this is not when you're doing, little minis or something, but the idea here is that they wanted this in the garden. This family's from all different places around the country. They're there for a short time. It was kind of a last minute thing, but it's one of my best clients ever. So they wanted to watch, and we did some open shade portraits in more appropriate areas, but the kids grew up in this little field of flowers that the grandmother creates. So we went out there, and this is a case where if you balance that handheld flash, you can at least fill in. Without that flash, I mean, their faces would just be shadow black.
Yep.
I mean, 'cause this is obviously high noon, dark lit. And I'm like, oh man. So I had to make the exposure kind of for that, but fill in those shadows a bit with that.
So-
and it
so
worked
did
out. I
you-
mean, they loved this. They got a portrait of wall size of this. This is the 2 sisters. And then, they thought it was great. So you have to be ready for and arm yourself for all these different situations, but make sure you have, the right equipment and you know how to use it. So practice. Don't just go, oh, well, gee, this is a situation. I better start practicing now on my clients. Get some friends,
No.
get some people out and try your different lighting schemes and record what you did so you know what you did right and wrong.
Yep. So talk to me about this one. How'd you determine the exposure for your key light, if you want to call it that, the light in your left hand, or did you use TTL, or how did you do this?
This was TTL, which I found was adequate, but I was aiming, because the TTL reads off what the camera's looking at, I put the exposure little box or whatever you're going to call it in the middle of the screen on the girl's face on the left, the girl in the black dress. Her cheek area was kind of there, so I just aimed for her cheek area and held down, and it read the scene and it read that, and that's what I went with, because they were bombing right along. They're like walking along, and I was like, hold it, wait, I gotta check my exposure. So I did a couple, and it seemed to be working fine within the parameters of what I could tweak a little if I had to. I did add just a little bit of digital painting look to this, but that had nothing to do with the exposure or the equipment. But they kind of like that Monet look, because this was printed on canvas and it was really beautiful.
Oh,
So exposure wise, I had to expose for the scene, and then the fill was, if I recall correctly, was either at, I think it was at whatever the scene was. It wasn't over because it's not overpowering. The scene really became the main light, and my flash in this case was the fill.
Because this is just so natural. This look, unless you're a pro, this looks natural. But if you're a pro, you go, huh, no, because like you said, their faces would be in shadow and just gone. And you've got every detail. You can see every blade of grass in the sunlight. I mean, this is just wonderful. I mean, yeah, sorry. I like your work.
Well, go out and practice that stuff. Find some friends, find some family, go out on a high noon day in August and start experimenting and get it down so that when you're working with clients, if you can avoid it, don't photograph that time of day or in those locations, but it's nice to know how to do it if you have to.
That's right. And again, you got to be very careful of the eyes, because some people have very sensitive eyes, and if it's really bright outside, they will squint slightly and they will see it in the images, and their parents will see it in the images, and they won't like them. So you've got to be very aware of that.
That's right.
Okay, inside strobe, church interiors, etc. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so again, all these flashes that are available have different light heads that can go on them. So a soft box. Now in this
Yep.
case, um, you could take either, there's multiple lights. A lot of people using now, especially like cake cutting, and goes back many years, where you can have lights coming in from the side, so you can get as fancy as you want. Because often these remote starters, I want to call it, that's what we have coming up in the winter on our cars. But
Yeah.
remote flash triggers, that's the word I was looking for,
Yeah.
will set off 2 or more multiple lights, so you can have multiple lighting and studio quality lighting on location with these. It just depends on your budget and what you want to start with. But if you only have one right now, you can still do beautiful lighting. So you could take, as you can see, this one light modifier there. This one was done with my 28-inch softbox on a stand, because in the case of wedding photography and things done in this manner, we're not quite as rushed. We're not worried about wind. We're not worried about running around. I have an assistant who's got it there, who's aiming it for me. And so we're trying to emulate as best I can some sort of studio lighting. This light could have gone on either side, but I did want to light that little girl's face. She's a little cherub, and I want to make sure that showed well. So it's a little hot in this image. It's better in a print, but the bodice of the gown's a little washed out there, but it wasn't in the finished product.
Yeah, and again, you've got the key light, if you will, skimming across the bodice of her gown, which just pops all that beautiful detail that they invested a significant amount of money to get.
And I did measure the light on the altar back there, because I wanted to, they call it dragging the shutter. I slowed down the shutter. Of course, the camera's on a tripod. So that probably was a 15th of a second or something like that, just enough to let that tungsten light, I think it was at that point, that warm light, because if it wasn't for that, that would just be a black background.
Yep.
And so the beauty of that would not have shown. The gold and the red are really, add to the whole thing. So just slowing down that shutter was really important.
But just to be clear, there's no fill light attached to your camera.
Correct. And not in this case.
This is one light over to the left, our left, and up as high as you could get it to get that nice angle on her face and her dress. Beautiful, beautifully done.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so this young man had seen photographs. People will bring you things from Pinterest or whatever, or TikTok or something, and say, "Can you do this?" And this guy wanted to be photographed. There's one of the oldest high schools in Bangor, Twin City to Brewer, where I live, and the interior. And this kid was an actor. We went on stage and he got in character. Some of the things really fascinating. He says, "I'm going to be the next Johnny Carson," so I'm waiting, see if I'm around long enough. He's
Right
quite a talented young man. But he said, "I just want to remember my days," and his parents really loved this, so he just wanted to sit on the steps, the marble steps, and this is the entrance to the theater where he acted. And so he just wanted to tell that story, like, either the show's over or I'm just beginning, whichever way you want to look at it. So I just took that one single light and had it up to the upper right. So I was balancing a bit of the ambient light behind me. There's some windows, so we had a little mix of daylight. There was a little bit of tungsten hanging from some big lamps above us, but not too much influence on the exposure. And then just the exposure with the flash into the softbox at the upper right on a stand. I did have an assistant there, but that was just to make sure it didn't fall over on me. Something so.
Right on.
And that's a wide angle lens. He just wanted this low kind of different kind of angle, and that's where that was. This was a friend of mine. I did his baby portraits and his senior portraits, and now I've done 2 babies on the baby plan, but they got married a few years back, and it was high noon on the coast of Maine.
Wow.
Worst lighting conditions you could think of.
Yeah.
I'm like, "You sure you don't want to get married at sunset? It's very nice." Like, "By sunset, we'll be on a plane for Antigua." I said, "Okay, well." So I pumped up the flash as much as I could, handheld, as they walked on the beach, and we did formals. They really wanted the background to be this. They got married right there on the sand. So everything was outside, high noon, direct sun, very few clouds. And so I just did the best I could. Some of the sand action as a natural reflector, kind of back up at the faces. So that was a help. And then the flash, I just basically held almost kind of right above my head, straight at them, because the angle it was at wasn't going to be as pertinent here because they were fairly far away. But just so that they had some exposure on their faces that I could work with.
Yep. And what light adapter, what kind of light attachment did you have
This
to soften the
this
light?
literally this was on my Flashpoint flash, that real powerful portable flash, not a softbox. And on that it has this light dome that's white. Well, it's a dome really. It's magnetic and it sticks on there almost like a big not bare bulb, but a soft bulb. So
Okay.
it diffuses the light enough. You know, if you're far enough away, it almost kind of doesn't make a difference
Yep.
this far away. But
And then
I just, you know,
and
go
then
ahead.
what about, how do you train the seagulls? Because I've had trouble with them before.
I threw French fries on the train. And no,
That's good.
yeah.
You're quick.
See, that wouldn't have been true, because if there were French fries around, I would have eaten them. You know, they would have been after me. But yeah, they were all over the place, and they were lucky. We were lucky. They just flew into the frame a few times. I said, okay, got it. You know.
Yep. Beautiful. Nice work. Your work is just beautiful. I
Well,
can see
thank you.
why you're so successful, because you know how to market, and your work that you're marketing is just exquisite. You're doing a really nice job. You do beautiful work.
Well, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that very much.
You're welcome. And since we have absolutely zero questions, I mean, that either means that everybody is so in tune with what you're saying, and you've done such a beautiful job that it left nothing for them to imagine. And
You know what
surely,
I'm imagining? I'm imagining, Chuck, that I know he couldn't be here today, and we missed him. Your son Todd, good
Mhm.
teaching partner here. But I'm imagining maybe some replay he'll hear this. He'll be having popcorn, watching us. So I just wanted to sure to say, hi, Todd. We missed you, Todd.
Yeah, there you go. That's very thoughtful of you, Tom. And Shirley says, love these photos. Thank you so, all capital letters, much for sharing. You're welcome, Shirley, and thank you, Tom, because I know this was a tremendous amount of work on your part, putting together these images that you wanted to use as examples, and it was just fabulous. So, and of course, now this has been recorded so that when it's just put up on the vault, you can go back and watch it again if there was a specific detail or something that you missed or that you're wondering about. You can go back and watch it again to get the details. But this was just so much fun. We just literally talked about something that we both love to death. We just love lighting because it makes helps our clients to look their very, very best. And that's our job. So thank you, Tom. And
My
thank you to
pleasure.
all of you who were on here live. And we'll talk to you again next time. Any last minute comments, Tom?
It's an honor to talk to everybody, and stick with it. We're here to help you. So whether you're trying to
That's
improve
right.
your photography skills, or more importantly, your marketing and merchandising skills, we are here for that purpose. So stick around.
Yeah. Thank you again. You were terrific today, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.